As I already mentioned, during the last financial crisis, we had seen a rise of the most popular technology companies nowadays. We also expect this to happen during this crisis and post-COVID-19 era. For some time now, the Startup Build program that we are working on has been implemented globally and most recently in Southeast Asia. Philip, who will be a presenter and moderator of today's meetup, has spent some time at the beginning of the year in Singapore, where, among other things, he worked on the venture building model. To make the model of venture building more familiar to Croatian companies, he wrote 4 articles on this topic for Croatian tech portal Netokracija. And you can go there and read those articles if you still didn't. If you are interested in more and want to learn more about this venture building model, I suggest you to go there and read it out. Also, as we believe that venture building is an opportunity for both startups and corporations, we wanted to create a tool that is going to help you assess if your company is ready to innovate by using venture building model. We will share this link for the tool that you can all use during the presentation, and Philip is going to explain more details about how this tool works. Today with us, we have kind of honor that we were able to bring together experts from Singapore, London, and also from Zagreb to discuss the topics of venture building model. For us, it is very important that you join the movement, actively participate in this event, and take advantage of the opportunity which venture building is presenting to startups, corporates, and also individuals. Therefore, before I announce our speakers, which is Bryan Long. He's a founder of Testing Ground, where he's a CEO, but he has also experience working as a digital transformation expert and manager for Citi Bank from Singapore. And also we have here, you already met him, Nicholas Wodtke. He's digital transformation and global leader. He worked for Disney, Samsung, Sony, and he's coming from London.
Welcome everyone. I'm very glad to have you from many countries around the world in Europe. Many of you we know, some of you are new to our organization and our community, and we are very happy about that. So as announced, we are going to speak about venture building today, and we are very looking forward to hear Bryan and Nicholas and then to share about the topic. But before that, I would just like to make a short introduction for many of you who might not hear about the model before. So along as you're writing your answers to Mira's question, let me share a few thoughts about venture building and try to introduce you the model in brief, in few minutes, as it's pretty complex. Also, for extending the knowledge, you might read one of or more of the articles I wrote recently for Netokracija about venture building, about business models around it, and how it's used in corporate environment as well. So in brief, I would say that venture building is an innovation approach dedicated to systematically produce new companies and help them grow. So that means that it's an organization that is actually industrializing entrepreneurial skills and creating companies. That said, there are a lot of characteristics of this model, but some of the most important are those three that you can see on my slide. And first of which is that it acts as a co-founder. That means that comparing to some other similar models, I'll talk about venture builder actually is the one that's forming the team and participating in brainstorming or identifying the business opportunity. So it acts as a co-founder, and that said, it also has a specific role, but a share in equity of this newly formed company. Second very important thing is that it has a methodological approach in ideating and testing and then growing and scaling the company. So the whole startup experience and know-how from the founders of the venture builder are actually transformed and translated into best practices and methodologies that are used to build new companies. a series of companies. And the third and not less important thing is that venture builder has access to entrepreneurial human resource that is very important to actually have as a prerequisite to build any future companies. So those people are usually seasoned entrepreneurs that are familiar with the methodologies and that can apply it in very efficient manner. When saying that venture builder is also similar but a very different model than some more let's say famous ones like accelerators or VCs, maybe the best thing to show is this simple diagram which compares them. So the main difference is that the venture builder actually starts from very beginning, which means that it finds the business opportunity to act on. So it forms the business idea, forms the team, and then finds the capital, leads the venture, but also provides the methodology to validate everything around the business idea and to grow the company further. And it is also the opportunity to give talent and have benefits from the synergy of the portfolio of different companies that venture builder has formed in previous projects or in current state. It all started sometimes around 1996 in the States with Idea Lab, but during time it got spread around the world, and today we have around 300 organizations that call themselves venture builders. So 300 organizations, many of them are working for the market, which means that they are producing companies for investors and for the market to actually exit the company at some point and gain from the equity value. Second model is in-house venture building, which is usually inside of big organizations like corporates or even governmental organizations, agencies, and so on, that can build new businesses in-house and then spin them off or use them to create synergies within the existing business models. And the third one is venture building as a service, which actually acts as a service for bigger organizations as well, but combining outer world and inner world together to create new ventures. That said, I would like to cross to a topic of difference and comparisons between corporates and startups, because this is a very interesting and important part when talking about venture building as a service. And by doing some of the research and the work in the area, I do find this part, venture building as a service, as maybe the most impressive one. So many of you actually do have, you can list a lot of differences, but also similarities of corporates and startups. But if I would ask you what is the main difference, I hope that many of you would actually answer that the difference is that the corporates have a sustainable business model. So the main difference, the difference is in the business model sustainability. And the startup is an organization that is actually defined by its quest towards sustainable business models. And many of them actually do not succeed on this path because of different reasons, but one of the most important reasons is that there is no market need and they do not have actually the product that the market will buy or use. And then this process is pretty hard and sweaty and looks something like this every day. On the other hand, we do have corporates that have sustainable business models and they can exploit it over time, but it has a limited growth potential at the end. And there is usually a threat of new entrants in their existing business that can disrupt the business. And when looking at this diagram, which I pretty much like, and it actually compares the most innovative companies with the average companies after the last financial crisis, 2008, 2009. And what you can see here is that those most innovative companies have actually been getting much better returns to their shareholders, which is a huge 4% a year. And yes, these are the 50 most innovative companies comparing to the average, but that's also not easy, right? And some of the reasons are that there's a lot of bureaucracy inside, there's a lot, it's limited by the size of the corporates to innovate, and they do have to miss many small opportunities because those opportunities are not big enough to act upon them, or that's how it's perceived at the moment, right? But that's a hamster wheel sometimes, which looks like that in a corporate innovation life. But this doesn't mean that there is no solution. And one of the solutions actually is something that we are going to speak about today. And when we think about startups, there is actually a lot of very, very good things about them, like adaptability, ingenuity, agility, speed, and so on. So a lot of positive things that startup can get into the relationship. And also the corporates with a bunch of resources, market access, credibility, financial stability, and other things can benefit the relationship to actually create a synergy between and have an innovation together. Yes, this has been tried on many different levels with many different models, and I would say that venture building is one of those, and one which is maybe the hot subject at the moment and the trend. But just to finish my speech here is with this slide, which actually shows us how what was the growth of venture investments of large organizations and companies in last 5 to 6 years. And you can see a huge growth in this part of their activity, which I believe will actually extend in the future despite the crisis that we can expect, because it's a way to fight disruption. And it's a good segue towards our topic today about venture building that guys from Singapore and London will also present. So to actually introduce our guest speakers today, Bryan and Nicholas, I hope you're still here with us, did not go to shower or training to get some creativity before your speech. Yeah, you can please join me here.
I'm here.
Excellent.
Yep. Hello.
So, guys, great. I do assume you have some things to comment on the points I shared, but before that, I would also like to know, besides the first question we are already heard from you, which was pretty interesting. So what do you guys think, and what excites you about innovation and startups at the very beginning?
Okay. Well, from my perspective, I mean, I get, for me, it's about problem solving. And I've always thought that, how do you define yourself as an entrepreneur, or what is an entrepreneur? I always think about entrepreneurs as people who can't help themselves, but try to solve the problems in their daily life. An entrepreneur walks into a restaurant and asks questions. Well, why is it taking so long for my food? Should I, is the chef doing it quickly? Are the orders being taken? Or, are they seating people fast enough? So they're the kind of people who just can't help themselves from identifying problems and trying to unpack those problems and look into the rationale for those. So me personally, that's very much part of my DNA. And I love finding and identifying problems in the world and trying to solve them. And I also enjoy building things. And so I think for those people on the call who are wondering, gosh, am I, is this the right, profession for me? Is it the right, it's really a question about feeling completely lost and immersed in that. So that's sort of my first reaction. Bryan?
Yeah, so for me, what excites me about innovation and startup ultimately is the outcome, impact, right? So we are looking at impact in terms of how it helps people in their daily lives. So I like to work on startups that are tangible, right? Where that you're actually not just working on something incrementally, right? The point of innovation and startups is 10x. We are looking for a huge jump, a huge improvement in somebody's lives. Now, so I mean, I've worked in various contexts, from the civil service, the Ministry of Defense. I've done my own small business. I've done startups. I worked in the bigger bank. And one of the things I still come back to why I want to do startups and why I'm trying to do my own ventures is just because I have one, control. Number two, it gets me closer to the impact that I'm looking for, right? But ultimately, it's also about this ability to create a magnitude of difference, right? Completely different than if I were working on smaller company projects. Well, at least that's for me. So if I'm going to work on a startup, it's got to be a 10x impact in my head, right?
Okay, great. So problem solving plus impact, that's a magic formula, I would say. Huh? So when you remember your career in military, did that learn you anything about innovation?
You know, so I was an Air Force engineer. So just to let you all know, I was working on the F-16s and all the airframes of the helicopters here in Singapore. So yeah, so I was the guy that was signing off on cracks and letting the pilots fly off, right? And I can tell you one thing is that innovation is scary. You need predictability, reliability, right? And one thing working in the defense world is that innovation is not considered part of the pie. And actually a lot of things I cannot tell anyone when I come home. And so for me, coming out from that environment meant that I was now free to try different things and share it with my family, share it with my friends, right? And have some tangible outcomes to show them. So for me personally, it was a huge shift, moving from the Ministry of Defense and into my own ventures. So yeah, there's a big difference there.
Nicholas, you were part of the big companies and you were running innovation departments there. And what would you say, what were the similarities and the differences between those in media business and tech business?
Well, I mean, there's a lot we can talk about with large companies, but I mean, I think, venture or innovation in large companies is very challenging. There's a lot of obstacles that you face. One of those obstacles is agility. So we talked about, I think you talked earlier about the need for speed and the ability to make decisions in a sort of quick and repetitive manner. That's very difficult in large organizations. Culture is another challenge, as often people within our large organizations feel threatened potentially by a team or a group who is being more agile and more responsive and perhaps has bigger ambitions for that company. There are other more practical challenges like budget. Often a corporate budget may not allow for the ability for a venture group to make a decision promptly and then allocate money to a certain way because there's accounting processes or there's approvals or procurement. And there's also other challenges around things like getting buy-in from existing executives. How do you go, for those of you who work in large corporations, how do you evangelize? How do you promote your efforts within the company? And that takes a huge amount of effort as well. So there's a lot of complexity around being an innovation within a large corporation. And your question is broad, but I would say that a true entrepreneur within a large corporation or a venture builder has to have certain qualities that will allow you to kind of break through those obstacles and create an environment that can be successful. But it's a big challenge.
Right. Thank you. Bryan.
Yes.
We are looking forward to see your slides and to hear what you have to share with us. So if you like, we can start.
Let's hang on a while. Let me pull it up and here we go. Should be sharing. You're seeing my slides?
Yes.
Okay, coming up. All right, so I met Philip about a couple of months ago before the COVID-19 really struck hard, right? So that was interesting. He was here to do Startup Drill and he reached out to me. We had conversations And I organize Singapore Lean Startup Circle over here as part of a passion that I have around helping entrepreneurs start their ventures. And then we started talking together, and we say, hey, there's an opportunity here in terms of venture building. And so I'm very happy to be here to be able to share with you all the process of creating a venture. The first half of the slides will kind of be leading you through the process of creating a venture. So it's kind of theoretical. After that, then I'll start telling you all some more stories. Okay, so I'm going to just introduce myself. I'm Bryan. I'm the founder of Stacck and Testing Ground. Testing Ground for a long time was my passion project, helping companies and startups to learn lean startup and to test out their idea. I then used those concepts on Stacck, the last startup that I did in the B2B realm, and then I exited from it about 2-3 years ago. And ever since then, from there, after I exited, Citi Bank actually asked me to join them to do business transformation, and that was interesting. Hope to be able to share some of the experience later on in the fireside chat. But after that, the startup bug was still biting me, right? And I said, I got to work on something else. And so I came out and I did Testing Ground formally and started it up with some other co-founders. I'm also an entrepreneur in residence for a university here. I usually speak on lean startup topics, and I've done it across Southeast Asia. And I mentor hundreds of startups, right? All across multiple events. Just a little thing about me, I'm a mechanical engineer. I will got an MBA, and I'm also I've got a law degree. So I always tell people that, look, I'm able to create value, distribute value, and I can protect value, right? So very well rounded in terms of entrepreneurship, and I found it very useful. But I do tell you one thing, right? My first startup failed like crazy. Lost a lot of money. Okay, nothing that my MBA could help me at that point in time. All right, and when that failed, I read a blue book called Lean Startup. And that was where I kicked myself in the butt and said, oh, shit, I'm an engineer. I know lean. I did my MBA, so I know business models. It never occurred to me to test, right? And somehow the MBA took the testing out of me as an engineer. And when I read that book, light turned on in my head. And ever since then, I've been sharing about how to test your ideas out. But now it's on a different stage, right? Previously, it was, the corporates are slow. We're going to disrupt them. But after joining Citi Bank, I realized that it's a cooperation. The model has shifted from corporate innovation doing it themselves, and then they shifted out and talk about incubators, right? And they wanted to incubate startups within themselves. Today, the model is a merger of the two. Why don't we just coexist, right? We are good at doing the business as usual stuff and the networks and the money. We help the startups come in, and you come in and be part of the team, right? And we give you the resources, we give you the network, we give you the time and the guidance, right, to get into the market and get quickly. And so that's the reason why I'm excited about venture building right now. So but the question is this: if you are here, if you are in a corporate, or if you are running your own business or your own company, the question, are you ready to do it yourself? So when you look at Strategize's latest book called The Invincible Company, they highlighted 3 pillars and says, look, in your company, do you have an innovation practice? Do you have leadership support? And are you organized in terms of organization? Are you designed so that you allow the startups or the new ventures to grow? And there are many parts here. I'm not going to go through it, but you have to ask yourself, if these are not set up, then you're actually setting up your startup to fail, right? Or your new ventures to fail within the organization. And based on my experience, a lot of these points are missing in large companies. A lot of them do ask me, hey, Bryan, can you do a workshop? And I say, it doesn't matter whether I do a workshop, right? It's not going to change anybody's life. Guess what? Your performance management system, end of the year, you're still going to measure based on success. You're not going to measure how many experiments you run and how many have you failed, right? So in that sense, you have to look at it. Are you really walking the talk? Otherwise, who cares about innovation? Oh, by the way, I do speak pretty fast. So if you need me to slow down, Philip, just put up your hand and let me know, okay? So this is a
Let's
typical...
see how fast it can go.
No. Don't challenge me on that, okay? I can go really, really fast, all right? In any case, Philip has given me 20 minutes. I got 45 slides here, so I need to move faster, okay? So if innovation and doing it yourself, you're not ready, then what are your immediate options, right? So of course, one easy one is outsource it. Get others to completely build it out. You be the project manager, you be the product manager, and you give it to an outsourcing company, development house, and say, hey, you take on this whole project and you do it, right? Most of the time it's not going to work, right? Because it's not just technology that you can outsource. You need to do a lot more things than just outsourcing it. The next one, of course, is hiring talent. When I was in Citi Bank, we started hiring people from Uber. We started hiring people from some other top e-commerce stores. And what's interesting is that they were trying to bring in these talent to accelerate some of the changes. And it's normal, it's okay. That's if you can hire the talent, because the startups are also hiring at the same time. So it's not easy. The only reason why they could hire the Uber guy was because Uber left Singapore, right? So this person was perfectly primed to say, hey, come over to Citi and do data for us, right? So, but another option that we are presenting today is to work with a venture builder, right? Hand in hand, create a new venture together. And Philip did it very nicely to talk about it's a cooperation, right? Where the corporation is providing networks, resources, and even their own internal knowledge and frameworks, and pairing it up with entrepreneurs to create something new. And the entrepreneurs are actually coming in to say that, look, we're not starting from zero. Actually, we're starting from one. There's money, there's resources, there's opportunity. This is great. So now for this particular section, what does the entire process look like? So I'm going to go cover this for you. Remember, I only have 20 minutes. So I'm assuming you all know a lot of the lean startup design thinking stuff. So I'm going to skip by them. But I'm going to talk about the overall process instead. Okay. So here's roughly the process in terms of venture building. Quite a lot of things to look at, but let's just look at it, break it down step by step, or rather stage by stage. The first one at the first stage is unlike startups, most startups will start based on inspiration, right? Either that or you notice something wrong in life and you want to address it, okay? So, and they just get going, right? But when you do a venture with a company, you can't just start. You have to strategize what ventures would work within the company's resources, within the company's strengths, within the company's strategic objectives. So the strategizing is very important when it comes to when a venture builder is working with a corporate. It's not just, oh, that's your idea, let's go and test it out right now. You can't do that, right? Because there's not enough buy-in, there's not even enough understanding of the landscape, not enough understanding of what is available to you. You see, if you're your own entrepreneur, you know your own strength, you know your own resources, right? But if we are coming to help a corporate, we need to take the time to understand the corporate strength, the corporate's opportunity, the corporate's market landscape, the competitive landscape. So we need to strategize. After that, then the rest of the thing is kind of similar, right? Where after you strategize and say, all right, we'll focus on the business model to test. Let's do a jobs to be done. Let's understand the jobs to be done. We test the problem out to validate the problem. Then after that, we do design thinking to say what is the solution. Then we do lean startup again, and then we validate the solution. We come up with the first version of the product that you delivers actual value, and that could be a network. Of course, in lean startup talk, we call it MVP, the minimum viable product, after which you test the rest of the components of the business model, canvas, right? And once you realize it works, you scale it out, you find that customers love it, you then ask, how do we create growth loops? How do we grow this even more? And finally, for a venture builder, you have to bring it back to the core business, right? So you have to hire a team and says, how do we bring this back, right? So it doesn't just become another venture outside of the company. How do we bring this back together? So these are three broad stages. I'm going to go through each stage one by one, okay? So the first stage would be strategy, okay? What does the strategize stage, what does it look like? Now, I'm not going to share with you how we actually do it. There are ways that we do it because it's our own way of doing. You may not have access to that. So what happens is I'm sharing with you frameworks from 2 books where you can now buy or see online and learn from that, and you can easily apply it, right? Otherwise, if I share my own methodology, you won't have access to it the same way as you can have access to these 2 books. So the first book is by Mark Gruber and Sharon Tao. It's called Where to Play. It's about how do you find new markets based on the existing resources that you have. And then the second book is Invincible Company by Strategizer, of course, the creators of Business Model Canvas. The question is, how do you then find new business models, right? So the first one is important, finding new markets, because it's baby steps for corporates, right? It's like, we have these resources, we have these abilities, we have these capacity. What do we do with it? Are there new customers that we can serve with the existing resources that we have? So this is very cool because it's a simple staircase up, right? One step up from doing versus doing something completely new. On the other hand, if the company is very, very open and very adventurous, then finding new business models becomes something available for them. All right. So, and then if you buy this latest book called Invincible Company, you will find a whole series of interesting business model templates in there. They call it business model patterns and call it business model shifts, right? What can you do to explore and exploit the market? Okay. So I'm going to cover the first part, which is where to play in terms of finding new markets. So when you're searching broadly, the first step, as I say, is search broadly, right? When it comes to finding new markets, search broadly. Where to play gives you a worksheet, and it says this. First, what's your market opportunity set? And you'll notice the first thing they say is list the venture's core abilities or technological elements. You have to understand the main the parent company. What are your core abilities? What's your technological ability? What are the stuff that you can do really well versus other people? For example, here it says unique accessibility, aviation abilities, imagery system, and then you break it down into sub-abilities. Then based on these abilities, then you ask yourself the next question: what can we use these abilities to solve? What can we use these guys to solve what kind of problems? So you see, this is the part. What applications can you offer with your core abilities? Which customers may need them? And so in this case here, you say, oh, with our abilities, we can do industrial inspection, infrastructure inspection, and another form of infrastructure inspection. But each of them will have different customer segments. And when you look at those customer segments, you break down into very clear segments. Now, in startups, we never serve a broad market. We can't serve everyone. So what this does is saying that, hey, let's start from a very resource-based objective. Resource-based simply means let's look at our resources and let's start from there. Most disruptive startups starts from vision. That means they say, here's our vision. We want to disrupt this, or we want to create this new capability. So it's vision-based. But this methodology starts on resources. Okay. So once you see that, the next part is now that you know which customers and which is the opportunity, like in this case here, let's reach out to power plants and improve the thermal boilers, for example. Then you start to evaluate them based on attractiveness of potential versus the challenge. Is there a high potential? And are there low challenges to starting this? And so you will see that potential means there's a compelling reason to buy, there's a huge market volume, and there's economic viability. And so you assess it, right? And then you look at the challenge. Are there a lot of roadblocks from you getting to this market, right? In terms of implementing, in terms of getting time to revenue, are there external risks? And so once you measure these two, you then begin to get a better sense of the market opportunities, and you chart it out. Again, my suggestion, I'm not going to go through these deeply. I suggest that you go into the books and look at it for more details. And then after that, this is really interesting. So the third thing that they ask you to do is then you strategize smartly, right? But how do you do that? You say that, look, which is your primary market opportunity that you want? And which other one is the one that you want to say that is a possible backup or growth option? What these guys are saying is that usually people don't think of a pivot at this point. So they're trying to tell you that if this doesn't work out, if power plants doesn't work, what's your backup here, right? Like, what are you going to test? And I like the illustration that they have. It's that instead of starting all the way from scratch, if you can find your next better option and you can leverage off and it's very close to the existing primary market opportunity, you're not starting from zero. You're actually building a bridge across from one hill to another hill, right? And says, okay, since this one doesn't work, I'll go to another one. Okay, and so I like that one because it says that, look, there are things that we need to pursue now, or should we keep open, or should we place in storage? So, and it allows you to strategize smartly in terms of finding new markets. So that's in terms of finding new markets. But what happens when you want to create new business models? So in the latest book by strategizer Invincible Company, they talk about how do you then create by being excellent in one of the in one of the components of the business model canvas. And so broadly, they're saying that, look, are you a backstage disruptor, That means your back end is awesome. Is it your front stage disruption? That means when it's anything customer facing, you're awesome at it. Or is it your ability to make a profit, right? You're working on a radical way of making money versus how others have traditionally done it. Salesforce is a good example, right? Instead of massive upfront investment into platforms, Salesforce is saying is a subscription as it's a subscription as a service, right? So let's look at some of this. I'm not going to go in, but he's saying, look, are you going to excel at reaching out to new markets? Are you able to unlock new markets? You're awesome at doing it. Or maybe your new business model, lock in customers. Or your new business model is because you have awesome channels that people cannot replicate. Or maybe you know how to scale very well and very fast. Or maybe the way that you do stuff internally, right, is very different from others, and so you can move quickly and with very low cost. Or maybe your resources or your partnerships are so powerful, it's hard for people to come in and to help you and to do it. Then looking at the bottom, are you able to build innovative cost structures, or are you better able to capture value in terms of revenue and in the way that you boost margins? So these are different ways of building different models. So when you look at the book, Invincible Company, you will see these concepts in there. Then after that, in the Invincible Company, they give you assessment questions. So unlike where to play, they give you more. They give you canvases to look at. Strategize actually give you assessment questions and ask you to evaluate it on your own. Right, so there's one way for you to do it. Of course, you can also assess it using your own models and put it up on your own charts. But this is one way to do it. And then once you have done that, they ask you to put this all onto a portfolio map. And this portfolio map, on the lower left, you see this word. Unfortunately, I've covered it up. It's actually the word explore. And the explore means that these are new ventures that you want to try. Exploit, on the other hand, simply means the current businesses that you have that you want to make them better in terms of returns by improving their business model. On the explore side, you're not improving, you're actually innovating business models. You're creating new business models. So this portfolio map then begins to map out all the business models that you created and says, all right, which one do you think is higher return versus risk? Some things are clearer, maybe because you're cloning it for the first time in Croatia. It could be you saw it happen in another country and you think it will work very well in your country. Or it's because somebody else has already done it in your country and it works and you just want to come in as a better alternative, right? So there are many ways to use it. So again, look at the books, and I highly suggest that you read deeper into them. Again, I'm not covering them. I only have 20 minutes and I'm already halfway through. Now, so what happens after you have strategized? What does the seed stage look like? So this one should be easier since everybody's here from Lean Startup Circle, right? Again, from Invincible Company, they kind of say, look, you need to design your business better. And I'll explain that by going backwards. So I'll show you first, right? You design your business and then you test it. All right, and it's an iterative loop, right? You create and test, you design better business models, and then you test those business models. Why? Because when you design better business models, as you learn, you begin to increase the expected return. Unfortunately, I don't think you all can see my mouse, but in any case, if you look at the left axis, it will say expected return. You are trying to increase this as much as you can. And most startups, when they start off with very rudimentary business models. So the expected return is smaller, but as they begin to learn about the customers and the opportunity, they begin to go up. Now, what Strategizer is saying is that, can you now increase that by designing your business model better upfront by doing a little bit more research, and then very quickly testing it so that you can reduce the innovation risk on the bottom left-hand corner. You want to reduce the risk so that your business model becomes clearer and clearer and is more likely to be able to get the product market fit. So moving quickly along, so we know where to design the business, and we talked about that in terms of the strategy. So now the next part of the seed stage. What does the seed stage look like? Mainly testing different parts of the business model, right? Starting off with the problem. Again, there are books there, Invincible Company, Testing Business Ideas. They're all available online. And hey, voila, here's the main thing, right? The main course of Lean Startup, right? We are talking about the build, measure, and learn. But if anything, startups, they come out likely they come out first with the ideas, then they start quickly building, blah, 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 right? That's what happens usually. But you'll find that when you do venture building, you don't start with an idea. Literally, you start by learning. You learn as much as you can about the market. You learn about the opportunities. You assess it deeply. Then you come up with the ideas, and then you build your experiments out, whether it's an MVP or whether it's an interaction, an interview, right? You then come up with measuring, and you get data, and you learn again. So this build, measure, and learn loop is a little bit different. We don't really build something off from an idea first, like a startup. If you're inspired, like most startups who come to me and mentor, they already have an idea. They kind of want to do it. They're not exploring much. I would then encourage them to test it out. But when you are doing a venture builder, the venture builder's first step is not build, but actually to learn, right? Learn a lot, as much as you can, come out with the ideas, build, then measure. And then what happens is then, of course, you test out the various part of the business model canvas. Test out the customer segment, test out the value proposition, test out whether can you make money. Will you be able to get currency out from testing with the customers? Do you know how to get to them? And do you know what kind of relationships they want from you? Do you have the resources to do it? What kind of activities are you able to do? And what kind of partnership? Now, the left-hand side of stuff, activity, resources, and partners are actually crucial. A lot of startups now come up with ideas and fanciful ideas, right? But they're unable to carry it out because they have no ability, no technology, no experience. And so it becomes very difficult to execute. And execution is everything. And finally, because of that, you know your cost structure. And that's what's going on. You're testing every various component of this. But just to make it very clear for you all, this is how we use lean startup in the venture, right? So the first thing we do is we use a jobs to be done framework to say, hey, what are the big problems? Let's talk to the customers. Let's figure out what problems they have, but mainly what jobs to be done. What is the progress that they want? So what's a job to be done? It's a desired progress in life. See, everybody has progress. What is a problem? A problem is very simple. It is something that stops you from getting the progress that you want in life. Okay? So what's a job to be done? Getting rid of that obstacle. Okay? So you're looking for big obstacles, right? And so this stage here, a lot of customer interviews, talking to them, understanding it. But once we understand there's a problem to be solved, the next thing you do, you used to use lean startup to say, well, would customers pay to solve the problem? Yeah, I know it's a big problem, but would they pay? So this is the part where you get landing pages, or in my case here in testing ground, we actually go out to the street and we pitch customers and we get currency for it. We get money to see whether would they say, yeah, I'm your early adopter. I want this thing. Here's money. Sign me up. So there's no solution. They're just signing up, okay? But once they have signed up and we know that, okay, people are willing to pay, we found our early adopters, then you use design thinking to say, all right, what could be a desired solution? Let's empathize, let's observe them, let's come up with a solution, let's create something. And lean startup come in after that again to say that, all right, could customers pay for this solution? How do I get them to buy? So the question now changed again to, how do I know that they're serious? It's not just an opinion or like, yeah, this is a great solution. All right, since you think it's a great solution, pay, give me money, right? Sign up for it, okay? And once you show that customers are willing to pay, like, all right, here's money, sign me up. The moment you launch, I want to be your first customer. Then you can use Agile to quickly do your MVP, right? Or create the next feature quickly. And then Lean Startup will come in again and say, all right, let's test it out. What's the next feature that will get us more customers and faster? Some people call it growth hacking. Some people call this product management. But usually, if you look at it, ultimately, when you look at Lean Startup, it works very well with all the other methodologies. But where Lean Startup is a little bit different is really the technique for testing out business models, right? Jobs to be done, design thinking, Agile is all on the product side of things, but Lean Startup is on the money side of things. Where is the money, right? And so when you look at a venture builder, we are always doing this process, which is should be familiar to you all in Lean Startup Circle, okay? If not, please again, you can check out some of these books online, all right? So the thing is this, is once you have business models and you put it out there, many times you will come up with an idea, you test, and then it gets invalidated. The pivot process is just as important. So that's where the venture builder, because of our vast experience of working across many other ventures or our own startups, we are less likely to engage in in navel gazing or like pity parties, like, oh, the project didn't work, right? Instead, we find very quickly, we go and find another idea to test on or to pivot on, right? And then we test again, hoping to get it validated and get it proven. ultimately, a venture builder is, because of the process and the methodology that's built up, is less likely to be slow to respond to what the customers want. Finally, the last part of it is growth. We talked about strategizing it, and then after that, the second part is we are talking about seeding it, and then now we're talking about growing the venture. So this should be familiar to a lot of people. It's called the Pirate Metrics, right? Acquisition, activation, retention, referral, revenue. Dave McClure's famous R, right? That's why it's called Pirate Metrics. The unfortunate thing about this is that it's a funnel. It's one way. It's one direction. And if anything, you start learning inside the startup ecosystem now, is that everything is in loops: build, measure, and learn. Whether is it lean startup, whether is it design thinking, a lot of stuff now in loops. And if you look at this growth and hook model, pretty much coming out from Brian Bufford's growth model that he talked about, and he's talking about growth loops here, and this is combining growth loops with hook models. He says that, look, you need a way to such that when you get new users and they take an action, you need to find a way to get them to create something that will help you to get new customers or new users to come on board. But on the other hand, NIO's hook model says that when they take an action within your product, how do you then get them to want to do some more of the action? So one is external facing, and that's why it's growth. The other one is called about internal product. They make them want to use more, and that's why it's called hook. Very interesting. And that's actually one of the things that venture builders is also doing for you. It's not supposed to just focus on product. It's supposed to focus on how do you grow everything. I'm going to just run through it. I'm running short of time. Then if you look at it, there are messy loops. And then ultimately you find, after testing, you're going to get to your acquisition loop, and then you can get to scale. And ultimately, you want to build it across different parts of your business model so that you can acquire customers across different parts of your product so that you can get them to form habits. And guess what? Growth isn't just in one country. Growth should also be done across countries. And so this is Southeast Asia. This is where I stay, right? I'm staying in Singapore, lower left-hand corner. We are just a small dot in this whole map. Too small to be shown, so we had to magnify it, right? So from Singapore, I always tell startups, you can't just do in Singapore. You got to test across Asia and test across the world. But for us, our playground is around across Asia, so we test across Asia. And finally, yes, as Philip said, venture builders will have to hire talent in the end so that they can bring the talent will become the CEOs to grow the business and bring it back to the core business. Who are the people involved in the venture? You have these few people, five of them. First, you have a venture architect, somebody who's a business modeler, who knows how to analyze really deeply about the venture. You have a growth creator, somebody who knows how to grow when we hit product market fit, or know how to find the customers, usually either sales or in terms of online marketing or digital. You have a product owner, somebody who says, hey, let's coordinate everybody, but also be the voice of the customer in this, okay? We are the technology developers. Obviously, we need people to create the technology, and we have people who are the experienced designers, usually the UI, UX, but it's more than that now. The experience of the customers coming in, leaving, coming back, those are all the things that needs to be considered. So a venture builder usually will have all these talents on board already, so you get going quite fast. And it's important to get a pipeline of new business ideas. And this is one thing that, because if you don't have your own innovation team, outsourcing it to or working together, a venture builder is good, because otherwise you're just doing innovation theater, right? All you have is just like, hey, look at all our ideas, and then it dies because there isn't a pipeline of ideas. It lasts for only a season. All right, so give me 5 more minutes and I'll end this. Philip did ask me, Brian, give an example, please. So here it goes. Here's an example of a big family business in Indonesia, the Riyadi family, and they own department stores and a lot of other businesses in Indonesia. And one of the things they did was to go into e-commerce many years ago, or at least 5 years ago. And so they went into e-commerce, and here's the story, right? So after they went into it, 2 years down the road, there start to be rumors of them shutting down, right? Because they couldn't get traction at all. They refused to take in investment money because they're saying, no, this is our own baby. We're not going to let investors come in. We will grow it ourselves. And so after a while, it actually happened, right? What was a rumor actually happened. And the Matahari Mall that they came out with, it actually combined back together with the department store. So it was kind of a face-saving action. Rather than close the mall, the online venture down, they merged it with the department store instead. And so, interestingly, the patriarch of this whole company, family business, he came in and he said, look, let the grandson take over. Look, do something with it, right? And so John, who is the grandson here on the right hand side, said, all right, I think let's do something here. And one of the things that John did when he came on board was to go into e-payments. And one of the interesting things that he did was that he didn't create his own startup. He didn't find an innovation team within. He worked with BCG Digital Ventures, which is BCG's venture builder team, right? And immediately BCG, this was what happened, right? So taking from this article, I'm just going to show you what happened. Within 3 years, working with BCG, within 3 years, OVO, which is the e-payment wallet that they did in Indonesia, captured 37%, 1/3 of the market, way more than the leading rival at the time, right? Another rival at the time. And it's interesting how fast the venture builder was able to get OVO and to where it is right now. And interestingly, OVO is actually now a unicorn, right? It's a $1 billion valuation at this moment. And what happened was, as you can see here, BCG handled the full scope of launching the startup. Everything, exactly what I said just now, including putting in place a founding team and even finding outside hires to become the CEO. Okay, and I want you to look at the second paragraph, right? Sorry, look at the first paragraph. It says, for BCG, they said that while most VC-backed startups will fail due to the high risk involved, BCG Digital Ventures should see most of its projects succeed. And why? If you look at the second part, it says, because big corporate clients like the Lippo Group have significant resource advantages over independently founded startups. They have networks, they have resources, and you can see that that's what happened. Use Lippo property to use become a wallet for people to pay their parking fees, and it started off from there. And Lippo has so many properties and became huge quickly, right? And so when you look at this, BCG Digital Ventures brought in the talent, brought in the processes, brought in the ability and the thinking, and pair that up with the resource and the reach of the corporate, it became a powerful, potent combination. So ending it off, I'm actually doing testing ground. I help startups and companies to test their ideas and expand into Southeast Asia. Startup Drill, of course, is Philips and Miro's company and service in Croatia. We are saying, look, is this venture builder innovation as a service something that we can offer together for you all, in which we help you to learn, we help you to discover new business models, help you to test those models, and finally to build the new business ventures. All right, I'm ended. Thank you so much. I'm sorry I'll go across my time, but back to you, Philip.
Thank you. Well, congratulations for all that energy this evening. I would be already tired, but very nice. And I think all these examples and methodologies you just explained will be a huge reading list for many people listening and just exploring everything you said. Considering the examples you shared, it's also very good to note that many venture building projects are actually not public because of proprietary data. And I personally know in Singapore, there are few banks, insurance companies, real estate companies, energy companies having venture building arms and collaborating with multiple venture building companies outside. But as said, this is something that's kept internally and pretty secret. All right, so I know that in the audience there are many people who actually do know a lot about innovation. Some of you are innovation consultants, some of you are lecturers, you teach about innovation, you teach about entrepreneurship, some of you are running companies, and so on. So I would really like to have your opinions and questions to start a discussion with Nicholas and Bryan on the topic. I did prepare a few introductory topics to share with you guys, and then anytime you guys feel ready, you can jump in and ask a different question or add something on top. So first of all, we've heard several times today already disruption, right? disruption as a word that became kind of familiar and important in innovation space because of Clayton Christensen and his disruptive innovation. But when we say about disruption, so how to become a disruptor before you are getting disrupted? That's my question. It's a broad one, but maybe you can give us an advice. Maybe we can give a shot to Nicholas and give Bryan a minute to rest.
Well, I guess I'm going to, my provocative response is disruption for disruption's sake is not really, frankly, a good strategy. So, you know, the first thing I would sort of unpack that statement and understand, are you know, is the existing company under threat? Are there smaller companies who potentially could infringe on their core business? And I think if you are the corporate entity, I think you have several strategic decisions to make. The first is, frankly, no, I don't mind. There are small companies who are perhaps, you know, entering into my industry or my sector, but I'm not worried because they, you know, they don't do what I do very well. Another perhaps more alarming response might be actually they are a threat, and we need to respond. And there are many different kinds of responses, as Bryan just alluded to. One is to acquire. So you can certainly acquire companies, and you can say, my strategy is to build a portfolio of companies, and there's a bunch of reasons why that can often fail, by the way. We can talk a little bit about that as a separate topic. Another idea is to partner. And the third idea is to kind of innovate within. Again, that was addressed in Bryan's thing. So I think it really depends on the industry. It depends on the problem that's being solved. I would say that, you know, I kind of have a personal, one of the things that I've witnessed in my background is I've seen, for example, at Disney, I saw the acquisition strategy executed to perfection. So when I was at Disney, we made several big acquisitions. We acquired Pixar, which is a large animation company. We acquired Marvel. We acquired the Star Wars and Lucasfilms. They were all acquired, and the execution was very well done. And there was a variety of reasons why those franchises ended up flourishing. But I've also worked at companies. I worked at a large electronics company who made a variety of acquisitions that were absolute failures. And a lot of those failures were due to the fact that the acquiring company basically neutered and removed the core of what that acquisition target did very well. So they either tried to impose their own processes, or they tried to impose their own accounting standards, or they no longer allowed the acquiring target to flourish and to be as dynamic and as agile as they used to be. Back to Disney did that very well. So I think Bob Iger was renowned for when he acquired Pixar to say, actually, he promised Steve Jobs at that time that he would that he would allow them to continue to create animated films in the way, and that their process would not be disrupted or changed in any way. So again, that's a long-winded question to say, I think it really depends on what the specific problem is, whether you want to acquire, whether you want to partner, or whether you want to grow it in-house internally. And if you do acquire, then you have to be completely prepared and ready to understand the complexities of acquiring a company and create the right environment for that company, that acquiring company or the target company to flourish.
Okay, thank you very much. So very good answer. maybe also to Bryan to help us. Disruption risk was one of the pillars of our assessment tool for your readiness, right?
Yep.
So maybe from that perspective, why is that? And you can recognize the graph here as well, but maybe Bryan can help and explain why is the disruption risk so important.
Yeah. So one of the reasons why we did the tool was to help companies make an assessment of where they are right now. If you're not even clear that you are under threat, then there's no way you even think about the future or to get ready for it. So the question is, are you ready? And I find that this is not most of the big MNCs, the multinational companies, they already have somebody who's worrying about disruption anyway. So this is not something that they are unfamiliar with. Interestingly, it's actually the bigger homegrown companies that are likely to not think about disruption. Because they are not in other countries, they are likely to be big in that country already. For example, in my case here, we have several big companies, government linked, or maybe it's a homegrown brand that became big and listed in Singapore. But in your case, if it's Croatia, there's a mega brand, but they don't think about disruption because they're very comfortable. They feel that they have a monopoly on things. And so disruption risk doesn't like, who's going to disrupt us? We are the incumbents, right? Like we have massive resources here. The funny thing about startups is that you can see even small things that start overnight can just grow massively, right? Just because of the scale of technology. So that's the reason why we did that whole thing here of this assessment tool, was saying, hey, are you even aware of your disruption risk? So if you're not, then how do you even answer that question, right? Like how to disrupt before you're being disrupted? Well, first be aware, right? Are you under disruption? Interesting for the rest of you, maybe you're working for a company, then you ask, what about yourself? Your role, your type of job, is it being disrupted too? So don't be ignorant of that, okay? So do be prepared.
I think the other thing to take into account as well is that the companies that are most responsive to disruption threats tend to be CEO founders. So large companies like Facebook, for example, we've got Zuckerberg at the top. He has complete control over the voting shares of that company, so he can respond very quickly, and they have responded, in terms of how they've, whether they've purchased WhatsApp, or whether or not they've acquired Instagram, or how they've responded to mobile. Those are very, very fast pivots that a single founder CEO can do. However, when you look at other corporations that perhaps have had, 20, 30, 40 years of history where the founder CEO is not in place, you have a corporate structure, right? And the corporate structure, everyone is incentivized to basically hit their quarterly earnings. So if I am a CEO and my earnings or the management, my bonus is going to be dependent on how well the stock price does over the next, year, why am I worried about a disruptive threat that probably may not rear its head for another 2 or 3 years? It's just not in my scope of influence. And so also, when you have even senior management within a large corporation, their bonuses and their incentives are very much built on hitting the numbers. So if my focus is on hitting my numbers, why would I get distracted by this startup who wants to do digital currency? If I'm in the banking business, I'll just worry about my loan portfolio. I'm not going to be worried about what's happening with Bitcoin. So a lot of the incentive structures in large corporations are not aligned to be truly innovative. And so the next step, corporations will often say, okay, well, then we'll create an innovation group within a large organization. But that creates its own tension, because you have one group who is responsible for innovation, and then the rest of the group who is responsible for their core business, their day-to-day business. And that's also not a particularly good flying formation, because you have competing interests, competing complexity. So it really is about the exact right culture has to be created, and the right organization structure has to be created to make sure that innovation within an organization is really possible.
Right. When speaking about the organizational efficiency, this is a good segue towards our next topic about innovation efficiency within a company. But before that, I would just like to say the slide I'm showing is actually the entry point to the assessment tool. Why I'm showing it, because these two criteria, the disruption risk that we were talking about, and the next one that I'm going to talk about, the efficiency of innovation or the innovation capability, the internal one, are the two pillars of the assessment tool. And maybe good to note is that this is a tool that we created just for the purpose of helping companies to actually estimate their position in present state, and it's free of charge, and you can try it and use it. So, Bryan, you heard what Nicholas said, of course, about the organizational structure and its importance and the decision-making processes. So the cost effectively, how to build the innovation capability. You were presenting the outsourcing model and innovation as a service model. What would be the difference? You're muted.
Sorry. So I've been in the startup scene in Singapore since almost 10 years now. And I've seen a lot of different innovation models. We started off with accelerators, then the corporates came on board and said, we want to do our own corporate accelerators. And then they did their own hackathons, bring us startups to come in, do the hackathons. And then we see them saying, okay, you know what, let's build it internally. So they did their own innovation labs, right? And it's hilarious how there was one project that was talking innovation lab. The entire project that they did the entire year was to do a Facebook chatbot, right? And I was like, why would it take you a year? Yeah, because of our internal processes, we had to get it cleared like crazy, right? In order for us to connect some APIs together. So, and that's the reason why when I look at this latest model, which is the venture builder model, and I've seen that it is a healthy middle, right? It's a healthy middle because it involves people from the corporation and then people who by nature are entrepreneurial and bringing them together and doing it together. To me, that's the most cost-effective way to build the innovation capability, because from this one successful, if all you need is just one project, show that it works, you now begin to have a halo effect, right? People begin to take innovation seriously, like, wow, that actually worked, that didn't fail, right? Or wow, look at that person, he actually learned a lot and he got promoted. All right. So once you have these stories going through companies, people start believing innovation a little bit more. But without a venture builder, everything is very iffy, because if you work with startups, you don't really know the internal makeup of the startups. If you go with your own innovation lab, you're not sure whether your people that you have put in there, are they capable to be like entrepreneurs, versus the model of venture building, right? So to me, I'm biased, I guess that's the reason why I'm here, right? But I do feel that venture building is a very, very cost-effective way to build this thing together.
And maybe since we are kind of close to the end of our today's session, and considering our agenda, I will jump to my last question, and that's, what does success look like considering venture building activities? What should people expect as a best case scenario?
I'll let Nicholas share that first, then I'll share, just because he will share it from the corporate perspective.
So, I mean, I can think of an example of, so when I worked at in Samsung, I led their product innovation team, and you know, I'll just tell you a personal anecdote, but we had our product innovation lab was responsible for building innovations around TVs, tablets, white goods, IoT, all these types of products. And we had a very smart team in there, and I'll give them all the credit, frankly, but they were looking at innovation around a washing machine, which is which we all know is a front-loading washing machine, and they had done enormous amount of market research, and they had determined that there were a couple of problems that need to be solved. And one of the problems was the missing sock problem, which you probably know, for those of you who've loaded a washing machine and then found one sock under the bed. Ah, damn. And so how do you get that into the washing machine after the washing machine cycle is started? So our team worked on that single problem for about 2 years. And we ended up coming up with something called the kangaroo pouch, which was basically the front load washer, where you had a little mini window inside of the front of the front window where you could put the sock in. We later, when we started testing it, by the way, in Southeast Asia, we realized actually that it had two purposes. Not only were people wanting to put the sock in, the missing sock, but they also wanted to put fragrance, because in hot climates, you know, people tend to sweat a lot, and so they liked the idea of being able to add fragrance into the washing machine as well. Anyway, I left Samsung and was at another job at Vion, and I was in the tube in the London Underground, or the London subway, and I saw about a 30-foot poster stretched across the tube with advertising the Samsung front load washer. And that was about, that was after I had left Singapore and I was in London. And that was one of the most satisfying experiences I had in terms of innovation, because you ask what success looks like. Well, success is about getting that product or service to market, or getting that product in front of customers. So I think those of you on the call who run businesses, you know, there's nothing more satisfying than seeing your product advertised, or hearing back from a customer who's happy and says, gosh, you know, thank you very much for what you've done.
Excellent story.
Yeah. So for me personally, I think I want to share what success looks like for the corporate, right? To me, it's not just the corporate has been the entity, it's the people inside the corporate, where innovation becomes something tangible, has a valid pathway. Entrepreneurship is a valid, intrapreneurship is a valid pathway. There is not just look at somebody's like, oh, why are you doing this? Like, oh, how would that benefit your day to day? But they begin to look at it as a valid career path. And they look at it because the corporate venture they did, it actually succeeds. Okay, many times people are afraid to step out and try new things. It's even worse if you're in a corporate and they try innovation projects and you look at the innovation manager working on it and nothing happens out of it. Stories like that actually turns people away. So when I look at it and I ask what would be success in terms of innovation for corporates, is that they actually demonstrate to their employees, right, that innovation is really part and parcel of the internal organizational structure, right? That there isn't a special project. No, this is a valid career path. So Eric Ries in the book, The Startup Way, actually calls this there's a chief entrepreneur. There is a chief entrepreneur. The same way as you have accountant, or finances, CFO, you have a chief marketing, or even you have chief revenue officers, right? The question is, who's in charge of entrepreneurship in the C-suite level? No one. There's usually some innovation person that reporting to somebody else, but there needs to be a C-level person. And once you have a C-level person, there's a whole suite of relevant career paths that can take place, right? To tell people that you can come over and do entrepreneurship within the company too. So to me, a real success in terms of corporate venture is to kickstart this process within the company and help them through it. So of course, Nicholas is talking about the external facing, when you see products being your project coming to life, people are using it, and I talk about impact. But I also want to remember that what does success look like is also for the employees. They are part of the team, right? So what does it look like for them? And the way it is to recognize them and make them feel that they are contributing, and it also benefits them in terms of their career path.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, we can continue this conversation on and on, but respecting the agenda and the other obligations of everybody involved in this meetup, I will have to end it soon. And I would like to invite Miro also to give some final words as our host today. Nicholas and Bryan, thank you very much, and for spending this hour and a half with us and sharing some of the interesting knowledge and thoughts and stories you had. I'm sure we'll have another opportunity to catch up, and nice of you, so kind that you share your email for others to reach out. And Miro, please, you can take over.
Thank you, Philip. Thank you, Bryan. Thank you, Nicholas. It was really interesting to listen to your presentations and discussion that you had about venture building model. And this all brings us to the end of this meetup. 1.5 hour has passed very fast. I hope you all enjoyed the discussions, that you learned something new. And just for the end, I would like to make a conclusion. And first of all, I would like to invite you, if you want to learn more about venture building model. Philip has really put in a lot of work to structure all the information about venture building model and presented it in a really interesting way. He wrote those articles at Netokracija. You can find them there. It's in Croatian, but if you know Croatian, it will be easy. Also, as Philip and Bryan were also mentioning, we were working with Testing Ground and experts from both Institute of Croatia and Testing Ground, and we have developed this tool which you can use to assess how your organization is ready to work with Venture Builder. You can use the link that I shared in chat and assess your readiness for venture building model. In case you have any questions, please feel free to reach to us, and we'll be really happy to answer any of those. At the end, before I close the meetup, I would like you to take your phones and then go to slido.com and use the hashtag or code H262 and give us your feedback. What did you like about the meetup, and what could we improve for the future? We always try to improve the things that we do. As this meetup, there were certain discussions on the last or latest meetups that we had, and then this topic popped up also as one of the topics. So we kind of put in all the energy and brought through you, Nicholas from London, and also Bryan from Singapore, to share their insights about venture building model. So go to slido.com, use the code H262, and then give us your feedback. I will move forward, but you can still add your feedback. At the end, I would once again like to thank you to our speakers. First of all, to Bryan for his presentation and the insights, and also to Nicholas Wodtke, who brought this perspective from big organizations to this meetup, and then you all could learn from also startup perspective, but big corporate perspective. And thank you also to Philip, who moderated the whole discussions. At the end, thank you all for coming to our meetup. I hope you enjoyed it. We did, indeed. And I am inviting you to take a look at our web page, because we are going to announce our new meetup that is going to be next month. By the end of July, we'll have our next meetup, and the topic of the meetup we will announce there. Thank you all for coming. Enjoy the rest of the week, and hope to see you soon on one of our meetups. Enjoy. Bye.
All right. Bye, everybody. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.